Hello everyone, I'm Blushie and I'm a Grandmaster / Top 500 support player and a Kiriko main. I've been playing FPS games for about 6 years, so when I first started playing Overwatch, I had years of prior FPS experience, so my aim wasn't really something I had to focus on. But since I first started playing, I've made a lot of changes to my settings, sensitivity, and peripherals that contribute to the way I am today. And the way I am now is completely different from the way I would aim 3 years ago. So this guide is perfect for people that are completely new to FPS as well as those with FPS experience. Before you start practicing and aim training, you need to determine your DPI and sensitivity. But what exactly is DPI? DPI stands for dots per inch and is used to measure the sensitivity of a mouse. DPI describes how many pixels or how far across your screen your cursor will move per inch of physical mouse movement. The higher the DPI, the less physical movement it takes to move your cursor. The lower the DPI, the more physical movement it takes to move your cursor. So which DPI should you use? Well, it's pretty much up to preference, but I do recommend having a lower DPI around 800 since it will allow for your aim to be more controlled and precise. Many pro flex support players play with 800 DPI and an in-game sense ranging from around 4 to 7. I personally play with 750 DPI and 4.5 in-game sense, but I didn't always play with a low in-game sensitivity. If you're used to playing with a high DPI or high in-game sense, the transition to low DPI may feel overwhelming, but the best way to get used to playing on a low DPI or low in-game sense is to gradually lower it. When I first started playing Overwatch, I still played with 750 DPI, but I played with the default in-game sense, which was 15, but I gradually lowered it from like 15 to 11 and 11 to 7, and then I eventually got to the sense I was comfortable with, which is 4.5. On heroes like Cass and Widow that are more aim intensive, I have my sense at 4, and on heroes that don't require much aim like Mercy, I have my sense at 5. But since Kiriko requires aim and constant awareness of teammates, I have my sense in the middle of 4 and 5 so that I can aim precisely when I need to, and still be able to flick quickly to teammates that need help. So whatever sense you decide to use, just make sure you are comfortably able to carry out all the motions you would normally do, like 180s or 360s. And if you feel like you are over flicking shots, then your sense is probably too high, and if you feel like you are under flicking shots, then your sense is probably too low. But if you do decide to play on a lower DPI, you will need a larger mousepad since a lower DPI requires you to make more physical movement. And the mousepad that I am currently using and recommend not only to new players but as well as experienced FPS players is the Logitech G640. The two main aim styles you will see people do is tracking and flicking. Tracking is following a target throughout their movements with your crosshair, while flicking is moving your crosshair directly to the target. To have good aim, you need a balance of both, but most people lean more to one or the other. Kiriko's kunai is a projectile, which means it has a travel time, so when aiming with projectiles, it is better to flick or aim to where your target is going rather than aiming where they currently are. And flicking is usually better because it takes into account the travel time of projectiles. For example, if your target is currently right in front of you, but they are moving to the right, you know based on their movement speed that they will be like here in half a second. So if you shoot your projectile now at the position you predict your target to be, by the time your projectile has finished traveling, and if your target continues to walk in that direction, it will hit them as they are walking into that position, rather than shooting after they've moved into a new position and probably missing because as your projectile is traveling, they are already moving in a different direction. If you were to track your target instead of flicking, there's a higher chance you'll miss because you are constantly making micro adjustments as you're tracking your target's movement. And by the time they reach the point you predicted them to be, they might be a little past it or didn't quite move that far. And you may be asking, well, why don't I just aim where my prediction is? Because there's no guarantee that your prediction is actually correct. It may look like they're moving to the right, but all of a sudden they combat roll to the left, and now you have to move your crosshair all the way to the left side of your monitor, which is why flicking is super important when aiming with projectiles. So in summary, when aiming with projectiles, you're flicking to your prediction of where your target will be. But to be able to effectively carry out flicks like this consistently and quickly, you need to be aware of all the different characters' movement speeds, hitboxes, and your projectile's travel time. A good way to practice building up your muscle memory for flicks like this is to go into a custom game. The one I'm using for this example is VAXTA, and track your target's movement and only shoot when you think you're absolutely going to hit them. And you should focus on trying to hit headshots since Kiriko's kunai don't do a lot of body shot damage. And you should be focusing on making micro adjustments rather than full range of motion, excessive flicks. Shoot slowly, don't rush your shots, and take your time. Even though this practice is for getting better with flicking, you want to track your target's movement to become familiar with different heroes' movement speeds and hitboxes, so that when you're in a real game, you won't have to physically track your target's every movement when dueling, and will just have the muscle memory to make small flicks that are consistent and actually hit your target. Practicing this also really helped me a lot with learning to pace my shots and calming down and not panicking as soon as I see someone. And this exercise is still something that I even do today when I feel like my aim is off or if I haven't played for a few days. Movement and aim are not something that should be thought of as two different entities. Movement has a huge impact on the way that you aim. Movement can give you an advantage when aiming or can be completely counterproductive if you're not actively thinking about how your movement is affecting your aim. For example, if I copy the movements of my target, then it reduces how much I have to move my crosshair with my mouse since I'm moving my crosshair with my movement keys. So, then I only have to rely on my mouse to make micro adjustments and vertical adjustments as long as I keep my crosshair at head level. If I stood still and only aimed with my mouse, obviously I'm still hitting shots and killing things, but I'm having to make a lot more physical movements with my mouse, and I have to make major adjustments when my targets have sporadic movements or change direction. But movement isn't only there to help you hit more shots, it's also there to help you get shot less. So if you were AD spamming to mess up someone's aim, you couldn't just make no movements with your mouse. You would have to move your mouse in the opposite direction you're strafing. So if you were strafing right, you would move your crosshair left. You're basically just trying to keep your crosshair centered as you're strafing. But this is just a simple example to try and get the point across that you should know what movements you want to make ahead of time, and actively be thinking about them, and then knowing how to complement and counteract those movements with your mouse movement. But your movement also depends on your matchups. I'm not going to move the same way dueling a Widow as I would dueling an Ana. When you're dueling heroes that have one-shot potential like Widow or Sojourn Railgun, it's best to have long, wider strafes than quickly spamming A and D, because on Kiriko, spamming A and D basically just keeps our hitbox in the same place. And also when strafing, you want to throw crouches in as well, but you want to try and time the crouches when you think they're going to shoot. And you also don't want to just strafe left and right, you want to try and be more unpredictable, so try strafing right and then left, and then left, or something to that effect. Just try and make your movements as unpredictable and random as possible. And you don't want to be jumping in duels like this because you don't have much movement in the air and you fall in a predictable arc that makes you an easy target. And if you want to practice your own movement, this is the third-person custom game code that I used. I think aim trainers like Kovacs, Aim Labs, and even Osu can be beneficial if you're completely new to FPS or keyboard and mouse, because they can help with the basics of aiming and building muscle memory, but I don't think they can ever replace just playing the game or doing custom games like VAXTA, because in Overwatch, every hero has a different model, hitbox, and abilities that no aim trainer will ever be able to replicate. But I do think aim trainers are good for people that are completely new to FPS or are completely new to PC, but I wouldn't recommend them to experienced FPS players besides like as a warm-up. Before I end the guide, some settings that I think are necessary to having good aim are having camera shake reduced, HUD shake off, and reduced menu movement on, and these settings are located under the accessibility section. With these settings, there will be less visual clutter when you're trying to aim, which is really nice in a game like Overwatch that already has so much visual clutter. Also, have high precision mouse input enabled, which is located under gameplay. And for graphics settings, make sure you have dynamic render scale off, because when the setting is on, it's constantly changing your resolution, which is really annoying, so make sure you have that off. And if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, make sure you have NVIDIA Reflex enabled plus boost if you have a 2000 series or above. And if you have a 1000 series or below, just have NVIDIA Reflex enabled. And the setting is really good because it reduces input lag. Aim is one of those things that just comes with time and practice. There's really no secret to it, so please don't get discouraged if you don't have amazing aim after the first few days of practicing. You will improve as you practice more. And a lot of the concepts I talked about in this video, Surefour also talks about in his video how to improve your aim with movement on different heroes. So if you want to see a more in-depth guide for a lot of different heroes, then I would go watch his video. It is a bit long, but it is definitely worth the watch. And I also stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/itsblushie, so if you guys have any further questions about aiming or playing Kiriko, then don't be afraid to stop by my stream and ask. Okay, bye!